Welcome back to A Better Choice Homestead. My name is Kelly, and today we are starting out in the garden. We are just turning from July to August. We're almost at the midway point of the summer, and I'm going to do kind of a quick garden tour, do a little bit of harvesting, and talk about the plans I have for the remainder of the 2024 growing season. I'm emptying out some beds, and I'm about to start some new seeds. I think that'll probably be on next week's video. Just to make sure that we get as much of a harvest as we can. I grow in a pretty small space. I know I've said that and I've had comments on my video that it's not so small, but my entire property is less than half an acre. I have a pretty large house and most of my backyard is an in-ground pool. So I have very, very limited space on where I grow. I take advantage of green stalks, I take advantage of containers, and then I do have a lot of beds. My property is about 130 feet deep. I think I take advantage of about 120 feet of it by maybe 10 feet total wide, plus another little area just off the deck up here. And I just pack as many beds in there as I can. I'm gonna go down and give you kind of a tour of where we look. We've had an anomaly of a season this year. It has been the season of a never-ending heat wave, torrential downpour. I think a couple weeks ago, I was bragging on the fact that I had some summer squash gold, that I had struck gold because I finally got a harvest, and I've continued to get some harvest off of those plants, but now they've got powdery mildew, so I'm not sure the longevity of those. I'll be starting some new squash seeds. We still have time. I think I have 75 days left before our average first frost. So there's still time to get some more plants in the ground, but let's take a look. I've got some more calendula flowers to pick from my green stock. And we have loads of buds on here, loads of them. So we're going to continue to get calendula for a while. Also in here, it's not on a base that's easy to turn. You need two hands. But we also have the edamame. So I'll be harvesting that here soon. I've got a lot of empty pockets at this point. I am actually going to be starting some new seeds for the green stock. My lettuce tower is empty. The heat wave killed that, but I'll be starting more of that here this week. Got some kale up here. I've got some sunflowers. The seeds fell from my bird feeder into the green stock, and so we've got some baby, little smaller sunflowers in here, some kale, and everything else I've pulled out of here. This was the spinach and stuff, and that just didn't make it through the heat wave. In this green stock, I have more calendula growing. Again, this is another volunteer. And then just loads and loads of green beans that I'll be picking here in the next week also. Just they're everywhere. This is just loaded with green beans. So this should give me enough for some canning, preserving. And these are not my only green beans. These are just the ones I have in the green stock. Green beans do really well. I use the regular green stock, not the leaf green stock, for my green beans, and they do super well. We still have a couple flowers on here, but for the most part, these are done. These are a determinate bush green bean, so they set all their flowers at relatively the same time, pollinate, and then produce and ripen all at the same time, which makes it really nice for canning because everything's done at relatively the same time. This is actually the tarragon that overwintered in the green stock from last year. I've got a couple pockets with that. And this is my 2024 herb of the year. I had no idea what I was missing by not having tarragon in my garden. This freeze dries beautifully. I love it. It is amazing on fish, on vegetables, in cheese sauces. It is it's a stupendous herb. I've got some more parsley in here. This is sage. This sage is a few years old in here. It keeps overwintering, but as you can see, the stems are getting pretty woody. So I'll probably refresh this next year. I've got some stevia in here as well. And down in the bottom down here, I've got some marjoram. So parsley's coming back, so I'm gonna definitely get some more parsley for freeze drying. And in the top up here, this is my cilantro, and it is well past its prime, but it is setting flowers and seeds. So this is actually going to be coriander. I don't know if you can see those very well, but they're just little balls, and those are coriander seeds. But if I save them, they will be cilantro seeds for next year's garden. And that is what I typically do with them. I don't typically save them as coriander, but I will collect them for seeds for next year. So here is a look at my trellis area, and in this bed right here, it's a long, tall, birdie bed. I've got my green beans and my cucumbers growing, and on the other side of that, I've got my berries. And I think you can see peeking out just over there, I've got some hibiscus in glorious bloom. So we're gonna go take a closer look at all of that. And this is the middle part of my garden. I'm still up on the deck here, and you can see that I'm doing some intense gardening, because between this cattle panel fence that runs about 120 feet down the length of my garden and this wood privacy fence, that's only 8 feet. And our first stop is going to be right here, because I see some calendula flowers ready to be picked. With calendula flowers, you want to get the ones that are just opening, that are new. That's when their properties are going to be most potent. And so every other morning I've been coming out here and picking from the calendula plants. This is 2 plants in here, and these are volunteers. I'll leave that one to open till later today. And it's still producing buds, lots of buds. So I'm going to continue to get flowers off of here. The more you pick, the more it's going to set flowers, because it's not done with its job if it hasn't produced viable seeds. So we'll deadhead the ones that are past their prime. And this is just kind of my jungle mess, but you can see the hibiscus back here is blooming in with the echinacea. It's just gorgeous. Look at these blooms. They're magnificent, and they're huge. They're huge. Now, this is another hibiscus plant right here, different variety. And I have got another one back here that has buds, but they've not yet opened. So this is also going to be glorious. If I remember correctly, these are more of a, I think it's called dark mystery. I think it's more of a light pink with some magenta versus the bright magenta color. And down here, I've got 3 or 4 more of the volunteer calendulas. I didn't plant any this year. These are coming up from seeds from last year. They're just lovely little flowers. And we'll get more from inside the garden as well. And this is back up at the top of the garden, up near the berries. Look at this hibiscus. There are blooms everywhere. I'm going to deadhead these too. To encourage new growth. But they're lovely, very showy. And here's the cucumber plant, and you can see that it is starting to die back. I think the cucumber beetles did get it, but I've been getting quite a bit of cucumbers off of here. I'm happy with the haul. There's only so many cucumbers I can eat, but I'm going to go ahead and pick a couple of these, and I'll show you one that I'm leaving to get seeds from. Here's a good one. Just twisting it off the plant. There's a couple here that are not quite ready. They're still kind of small. There's another one up here, so we'll leave those. Here's the one I'm going to save for seeds. see if I can get him to show himself. This guy, you can see how plump he is. He's going to continue to swell. Over time, he's going to turn yellow. When he turns yellow, I know the seeds inside are ripe and I can save those for next year. In here, we've got 4 cucumbers to get. I've got one down here. He's a pretty good size. Just going to twist him off. I've got one here. Those are some good sized cucumbers. There's one here. And one down here. So 5 cucumbers today. And there are a couple more in here that are a little bigger than babies, but not ready to come off. And in here are my blackberries and raspberries, and it is time to start picking some berries. Those are so delicious. I'm gonna come out here with a little bowl because I think we've got enough to start saving these. I'll probably freeze them until I have enough to do some sort of a preservation with, but they're everywhere. It's just loaded in here. This is the first grow bag at the top part of the garden that I have a tomato plant in. I have drip irrigation run to these hanging baskets, and then they overflow and spill down into this tomato, but this is just a grow bag and there's a lot of fruit on here. This is just an extra tomato that I didn't have room for in my beds, so stuck it in there. He's doing great. And right across from that, I have this gorgeous volunteer borage plant. Borage is edible, tastes like cucumbers. The flowers are pretty, and the flowers are actually nice too. Excuse my fingers, those are the ones I broke. I'm just waiting for those nails to fall off. But this can actually be put in salads, or you can freeze it in ice cubes, just, to make kind of a splash for an event. Aren't those pretty? And they're edible. And they taste like a sweet cucumber. I have a bunch more borage plants all on the outside of this bed. I grew borage in this bed, I think last year, and the seeds dropped, and now this is just loaded with volunteer borage around this bed. And next to that, I have another grow bag with a tomato in it, also being fed by drip irrigation on the flower pot above it. So this plant looks really healthy. I've just got him clipped up to the cattle panel fence, and it looks like this is a paste tomato. So there's a bunch of fruit on it, and the vine stretches. I'm just stretching the vine along the cattle panel fence. I've got another grow bag just underneath this flower container. And again, this one is just clipped up to the fence as well. Very healthy. And this hanging basket feeds the tomato plant that is down in this grow bag. And he's got some decent sized fruit on him as well. So you can grow in very small spaces. I've got 2 more grow bags. So the same thing, they're being watered by drip irrigation above them. And this grow bag has some, I don't know if you can see, but some decent sized fruit on him as well. And some just starting so he's doing pretty good. I can see that he's got some leaves that need tending to. Got some disease coming up on those. So I definitely need to trim some of my tomatoes. And there's actually one bed of tomatoes that's an absolute nightmare that I'm going to try to address today. I'll show you that. So first I need to figure out what tomato plants go in which bed. So this is one I want. This is it should be an Abe Lincoln. Whereas this one is the out of control cherry tomato. And if I can find where it's coming from, I can get it out of here and get some more airflow in here and tie up the tomatoes that I want. I just don't want to take off. I want to be sure that it's all cherry that I'm taking off. Okay, that is definitely all cherry. And this one as well. And this one. Okay. That is a big cherry tomato. I'm going to grab some clips. I think I might be able to save both of them if I can just get this cherry one up the trellis here. I just use these little tomato clips to either clip it to string or to the cattle panel fence. I can't even walk between these beds without stepping on tomatoes. I got something interesting on here to show you in a second. All right, our tomatoes are up off the ground over here, but I do want to show you the stem of one. Well, I just spent the last 2 hours tying up the rest of my tomato plants. It's made a big difference. I had to trim a lot of damaged leaves off that were on the ground, but whole stems were on the ground. So you know how people say that, you know, when you plant your tomatoes, plant them as deep as you can, take off some of the leaf nodes and just plant them deep, because all the hairs on the tomato plant are potential future roots. So here's one that was starting to root just by laying on the ground. Very clever plants, aren't they? Now that I've got this bed tied up, you can actually see my basil plants in there. Some nice looking tomatoes. I was able to save that cherry tomato plant in here. We'll see how it works. It's not ideal. There's overall there is just a lot of tomatoes in here. And here is that one of the volunteer calendula plants right here. And we've got some tomatoes growing up on this cattle panel. And then everything else is growing up on tomato hooks. I've tried to stem the bottom of them as much as I could to get some airflow in there. This one over here, I'm probably going to have to do some better trimming, but we can now see a lot of the saladette tomatoes in there. We've got some big tomatoes down here, and there is a really large one down here as well. That one's going to be a monster. My cherries are over here. I've got them even tied up into the tree. So, you know, I garden in small spaces. I make do with what I can. Here in this first of the middle garden beds, I've got a very mature broccoli plant. I'm actually going to harvest a lot of those leaves and just cook them as greens and get them preserved. Here is the bed I pulled all of the celery out of, and this is what I call the last bed of the upper garden. In here, I've got some more greens that I'm gonna pull from. They are the broccolis. And here is the back side of the tomato plant that I have in the first grow bag outside the garden, being watered by that hanging basket. And what I wanted to show you in this bed is this plant right here. So this is broccoli, where it was, and these are the seed pods. So I could wait until these got really, really brown and dry and harvest all the seeds in here, but I've done that. I have thousands and thousands of broccoli seeds, so I will be pulling him. I've got some Swiss chard in this bed, and my chives are also in this bed. But other than that, everything in here is pretty much done. So I will be able to plant some fall things in this bed. And in this skinnier bed here, I've got some chard. This all self-seeded from last year's garden. I've got a nasturtium in here with some little baby calendulas in there, and then 2 more beds up here that I can get things planted in for fall. As we walk down through the middle garden, you can see again the tomatoes. I've got some onions here in this bed. Lots of saladette tomatoes coming on. I've got some eggplants in this bed. You can see one that needs to be picked and one that hasn't even started flowering yet. I've got my opal basil in there as well. I've got some green beans in this bed and some peppers, and I think I see a pepper that needs to be picked. Oh, a couple of them. 3 peppers in there that I can get. The next bed here, I've got peppers with my tomatoes, basil, and some eggplant. And this is what I call my beet bed. It's a thinner bed, and I need to plant some more beets in there. So I'm going to be starting that this week as well. Got some more peppers and eggplants in this bed with tomatoes. Same in this bed. And the last middle garden bed, same. We've got the same with some bunching onions down there and one little green bean plant. Here's my balloon flowers and echinacea. This echinacea was a volunteer. And over here I have my elecampane plants that are just starting to flower. And then I've got all the buckets here that I used to grow in. I've got to find a new home for those. And in these containers here, I have my ground cherries. They got quite tall, taller than I'm used to them being. And here we come to the squash plants. So they are getting damaged now. They're still setting flowers in there. You can see one right there, but I don't think that these are long for the garden. So I'm going to be starting some more squash plants. And then I've got the tomatillas behind there. I've got my herbs in here. I've got thyme, rosemary, lemon thyme, oregano, and this in the front here is lemon balm. I'm going to move that to the back for next year because it's just massive. I've got my paste tomatoes in this bed. I did get those tied up a week ago, so those are looking pretty good. Along with basil. I've got basil in every tomato bed. And then here we've got some powdery mildew squash plants. So again, I don't think that they are long for this world. It has just been so hot and so humid. And then back here, I've actually got some onions. I haven't checked on them in a while. Oh, and they're coming up. It's probably about time for me to pull some of those. So I'll harvest those this week. More tomato plants on this trellis in this bed, along with the squash plants that again are really taking a beating. So I've got to get some new squash plants in the ground. More tomatillas up against this little trellis here. Lots of peppers in this bed. And again, another squash plant that has seen better days. But I do have some fruit down here I need to pick. So this little guy can wait another day or so. These ones down here, I'm going to grab. They're ready. I'll take those in with me today. And then this bed is all different kinds of squash and some volunteer tomatoes. So this is a volunteer tomato plant right here. And so is this one. This one's also a volunteer. I see flowers. I see some powdery mildew starting. This plant's not too bad. I've got some eggplants back here, but no fruit on these. No flowers either. It's just been so hot. I actually had to pause this video and take my camera inside because it overheated. It's 90 something degrees today. It's hot, it's humid, and I was soaking wet and filthy, so I went ahead and changed and put my hair up. This plant, I don't think it's going to make it, which is really unfortunate because I see some fruit on here, but it looks pretty diseased. As you can see, it just looks pretty diseased, but we do have a nice looking butternut squash back there. We got another zucchini in here. So I'm still, actually I've got 2 zucchinis in there. So hopefully I'll still get some while I wait for the new plants to bloom. And let's check out these huckleberries. I've not grown them before, but when they're ripe, they should be black. And these plants are just loaded. They're pretty big. They grow kind of like a pepper. I have them in containers. I have drip on the containers. But that's new for me this year, are the huckleberries. And again, that nice looking squash back there that probably, I don't know if he'll make it because the plants are not doing well. But this is the lower end of the garden in all of its jungle glory. I'm going to go ahead and get these 2 guys here while they're still young and tender. And we'll keep checking for the zucchini and squash over the next few days. And I'll probably harvest some onions this week too. Looks like I've got more peppers to pick here. My Malabar spinach is vining up nicely. I could harvest some of that. And then I've got some green beans too. Some pole beans. Look at all that echinacea back there with the hibiscus. It's just so peaceful and beautiful, especially with all the bees buzzing around. Well, that's going to do it for this week. A little stroll through the garden, actually some hard work in the garden. I actually did four tomato beds that were out of control. That's what happens when you don't tie up your tomatoes as time goes by. They grow so fast, and I think that they'll be fine tied up. So I'll just continue to keep an eye on them and watch all those green tomatoes start to blush and then ripen. Keep an eye on the squash so I can continue to harvest what it'll give me. And then this upcoming week, I'm going to be starting some new seeds, and I'll probably video that so I can get my beds filled back out for a fall harvest. I'm thinking more green beans, more zucchini, some broccoli, beets, carrots, lettuce, probably some others I'm forgetting, but that'll be next week. Thank you so much for joining me here at A Better Choice Homestead, and I do hope you come back and visit again soon.